All right, today we're cracking open a nearly 2,000-year-old text from a guy named James. And what's wild is that his ancient wisdom about the power of our words, it might be more relevant right now in our world of social media and instant communication than ever before.
So let's just jump right in with the central question James throws at us. He makes this bold claim that the world's biggest troublemaker is also one of its smallest. Any guesses? Yeah, you got it. It's the tongue.
So here's how we're going to break this down. First, a quick look at James's big idea, which he calls faith in action. Then we'll zoom in on the tongue itself, the smallest troublemaker. We'll explore its incredible power to direct and its terrifying power to destroy. Then we'll talk about the massive contradiction it represents. And finally, we'll get to the real root of it all, the heart of the matter. Okay, before we can really get what James is saying about the tongue, we have to understand the main point of his entire letter. For James, faith isn't just some idea you agree with in your head. No, for him, real faith is something you can see, something you live out through your actions. Now, this is really important because it clears up a common point of confusion. Some people think James is contradicting other biblical writers like the Apostle Paul, but they're not at odds at all. You see, Paul focuses on the faith that saves you, that makes you right with God. James, on the other hand, is talking about the actions, the works, that prove to everyone else that your faith is the real deal. They're really just two sides of the very same coin.
So this whole idea of a faith you can see, a faith in action, leads us straight to the main event in chapter 3. James basically argues that if your faith is proven by what you do, then the ultimate test, you could almost call it the final boss of spiritual maturity, is getting control of your speech.
And listen, James sets the bar incredibly high here. He says that if you can master your words, if you never stumble in anything you say, then you are perfect. Now, he means spiritually mature, and he says you're then able to control every other part of your life too. I mean, that's a staggering claim, right? It just shows how central our words are to who we are. To really drive his point home, James doesn't just list a bunch of rules. Instead, he paints 6 unforgettable pictures for us. The first 2 are all about the incredible, almost unbelievable power our tiny tongue has to direct enormous things.
This is just a brilliant illustration. Think about it. A small piece of metal in a horse's mouth can steer that whole powerful living animal. Or a relatively small rudder can turn a massive ship, even when it's being slammed by fierce winds and currents. In both cases, this tiny little instrument has total directional control over something way, way bigger and more powerful than itself.
And that's his point. Think about how a simple yes at a wedding altar changes everything. Or how I'm sorry can completely heal a broken friendship. Or how I quit can set your life on a totally new course. Our words have that same kind of outsized power to steer destinies, for better or for worse. But, and this is a big but, with that kind of power comes some serious danger. Because if the tongue has the power to direct and create, it also has a terrifying power to destroy. And James illustrates this with 2 more vivid and honestly pretty frightening pictures. His third picture is a tiny spark. A single match can burn down an entire forest. And James is saying it's the exact same way with our words. A single careless word, a little piece of gossip, a whispered rumor, a small lie, can ignite a fire that completely destroys reputations, relationships, and sometimes whole communities. And if you think that's an exaggeration, our source gives us this shocking, real-world example. In the late 1890s, 4 bored newspaper reporters in a Denver bar just made up a story that the Chinese government was going to demolish the Great Wall. It was a complete joke, but it got printed. And then it got picked up by papers all over the world. Well, in China, this fake news infuriated a nationalist group called the Boxers, and it helped fuel the violent uprising we now know as the Boxer Rebellion. A journalistic prank invented over drinks literally escalated into an international conflict that cost thousands of lives. A little fire indeed. James's fourth picture is just as intense. It's a wild, untamable beast, full of deadly poison. He points out that we humans have figured out how to tame every kind of animal on the planet, but the one creature that no person can ever fully, permanently tame is their own tongue. It's a humbling reminder that getting control of our speech isn't a one-and-done thing. It's a constant, lifelong battle. Okay, on to the final pair of metaphors. And these last 2 pictures, they highlight a fundamental, almost absurd contradiction in how we use our words. A contradiction that should really make every single one of us stop and think. James asks this really simple, common sense question. Can a spring produce both fresh water and salt water from the same opening? Of course not. That's ridiculous. A spring is defined by the kind of water it produces. You go to a freshwater spring for fresh water. It's just how nature works. And yet, he points out, we do this impossible thing every single day. With the very same mouth, we speak words of blessing. We praise people. We encourage our friends. We say, I love you. And then, maybe just moments later, from that exact same mouth, we curse. We criticize. We gossip. We tear people down. And James's reaction to this is blunt. My brethren, these things ought not so to be. This shouldn't be happening. So, the crucial point, which he drives home with his sixth and final picture of a tree, is this. A fig tree grows figs, not olives. The type of fruit reveals the true nature of the tree. It's the same with us. The words we produce, whether they are life-giving like fresh water or poisonous like bitter water, they reveal our true inner nature. They show what kind of tree we really are. And that brings us to the final and, honestly, the most important point of this whole explainer. James has shown us the problem. The tongue is this powerful, dangerous, contradictory thing. So what on earth is the solution? How do we fix this? James's entire argument really comes down to this profound truth, which was spoken by Jesus himself. The tongue isn't the actual problem. It's just a speaker system. It's an amplifier that is broadcasting whatever is playing in the heart. So the real issue isn't what's happening in your mouth, it's what's happening in your heart. And what that means is that the solution isn't just to try harder to bite your tongue or to force yourself to say nice things. That's just behavior modification, and it usually doesn't last. The true, lasting solution is an internal one. If you want to guard your tongue, you have to start by guarding your heart. So as a practical starting point, our source offers these 12 simple words, grouped into 5 really powerful phrases. Think about it. Phrases like please, thank you, and especially I'm sorry aren't just about being polite. They reflect a heart that's humble and grateful. Using these words intentionally can be the first step in a process that transforms not just our communication, but the very heart from which it flows. So, as we wrap this up, the challenge that James leaves us with is this. Our words are a window into our soul. They're the fruit that reveals the kind of tree we are. So the question for all of us is, if someone could only judge who you are by the words you've spoken this past week, what would they see? What does the window of your words reveal about the state of your heart?